I don't know if you've heard this, but I came up with this one: migrant crime. There's crime, there's violent crime, there's migrant crime. We have a new category of crime. It's called migrant crime, and it's going to be worse than any other form of crime known. We have no idea who they are, but they are terrorists.
So let's be very clear. Donald Trump does not care about the facts of the migrant crime, but we do. And we're going to reveal what's actually going on with migrant crime, the worst crime. But you're not going to be surprised that there's a gap between how he's describing it and what's actually happening, because in that little clip, he didn't do anything to hide the fact that this is just branding. He presented it as if he was an ad executive making a pitch to the Trump campaign. I came up with it. It's a new thing. We had this other crime. Now we've got this new one. Does he seem like a person who is genuinely aggrieved by a rise in violent or property crimes? A guy who's like seriously thinks this is an issue. This guy is delighting in stupid branding he came up with.
He rolled out migrant crime in the same way he rolled out his gold sneakers. I hear you guys are crime heads, and so we've got a new crime, migrant crime. Everybody put the word out. Like, it is so shameless how he does that. He's just like, so here's the BS I'm going to be funneling directly into your brains. Everybody ready? Migrant crime, okay? Let go forth, my stupid minions.
Yeah, and because, well, he knows that they're gonna love it, and they did cheer, and why wouldn't they? They loved for decades when crime being discussed often meant in practice not white crime. It's like another sort of crime, huh? Do you like our talk about crime? That's too subtle for these people now. No, now it needs to be explicitly migrant crime. You remember when Breitbart got in trouble because they had a category of news that was black crime? Like they logged stories under a header of black crime, and enough people were like, what the hell are you talking about, man? That Breitbart backed off of that. Now it's the literal presidential candidate who's doing it.
So it wasn't just SNL that invented that, because that's one of the best lines for the Jeff Sessions that Kate McKinnon played, and was like, everybody knows there's two types of crime, regular and black.
I didn't remember that.
Such a funny
I do
line.
miss her as Jeff Sessions though.
Yes.
But anyway, as I said, we care about the truth. So here's a little bit of truth for you. Perhaps helpful truth for regular people who aren't deranged, for Donald Trump, an inconvenient truth. According to an analysis of actual crime rates, the migrant crime wave is not supported by the data. Now, the New York Times acknowledges there have been some high profile cases of crimes being perpetrated either by migrants or by people who they pretended were migrants live on Sean Hannity's show, and then it turns out it's American citizens. But here is the interesting thing. They can be high profile cases, not because they're more common or worse, but because there's a narrative that it fits into. That's the way, like, think about it. To assume that the fact that the media is talking more about migrant crime means that there is more migrant crime means that you think the media is a perfect representation of reality. And since when has the right said that? But in this case, they just want you to imagine that the media is doing a bang up job. No mistakes, no edits necessary. But here's the thing, when you actually look at some of these places, going back to 2022, when there was the surge in migrants being transitioned into some of these cities, you have, for instance, New York. More than 170,000 migrants have arrived in the city since April 2022, but crime rates have not gone up since then. Despite that many migrants moving in, you would expect that if migrants commit all the crimes, there should be a wave of it, but there isn't. In fact, many major categories of crime, including rape, murder, shootings, some of the most significant ones, have actually gone down during the same period of time in which 170,000 migrants have come in. Well, you might think, okay, I love the idea that they'd commit these violent crimes, but they're definitely robbing people, right? Well, the data on that is not at all clear that there's some sort of migrant crime wave. Like usual, and I've looked at the data going back 25 years, it goes up sometimes, it goes down sometimes. There are some months where it's up, some where it's down. But if you compare it to New York back in the aughts, back around the turn of the millennium, they're all significantly lower. It simply is not the case that they're committing crime at outsized rates. But I'm not gonna let that, the media should not let that stop them. They're obviously getting a lot of people to, go to their websites, buy their magazines and stuff based on this pretend crime wave that doesn't actually exist. What do you think?
Yeah, and based on like fabricated stories like out of New York about how, some undocumented person attacked like, a right winger, and it wasn't true at all. Police instigated that attack. Just like this one little thing, the case in San Francisco that Trump couldn't get enough of an undocumented migrant who shot a woman, right? And the media, I mean, months and months and months. You know what happened with that? He found a gun, picked it up, and it went off in his hands. And he shot and killed someone, the poor guy and the poor woman. Like, these are the things that they are, making into massive cases, and it's because they're reaching. And the other thing is, and again, with the lack of a narrative around why people cross the border, is that in the Republicans' minds, if you cross the border, you already are a criminal. So it doesn't matter anything else you do. You've got a stain on your record. You're a criminal, and that's it. When actually, it's like a civil penalty. That's like, you pay for $250. Like, it's actually not that big of a deal, depending on the state.
Yeah.
But it certainly does not condemn you to be a criminal. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. All they're talking about is shorthand, brown people. That's it. That's all they write, because it's not about fentanyl. It's not about overdoses. It's not about the economy. It's not about safety. It's not about gun violence. I mean, gun violence, John. We know, like, again, the top cities that have gun violence are also not cities with a lot of immigrants in them. They're, I mean, they're like red states, whatever. Not border towns. Like, it's just because they're brown. Most of them. That's all it is.
And he's not even like attempting to hide that. He just says migrant crime. The crowd cheers. Laura Ingraham, who, what are we supposed to pretend that she's not familiar with these stats? Has nothing to say, because only a journalist would speak up in a time like this. So she has nothing to say. And here's the thing, the media's gonna go along with it. They do this, but by the way, like, if you have not been following American politics for long, every single election year, crime, assuming a Democrat is in charge. And oh my God, there's a caravan, it's in Guatemala and it's coming. And it never turns out to be true. It's a lie every time, but they do it either because it gets people to pay attention, to buy newspapers or whatever, or because they think like, oh God, the right is talking about it. If we don't pretend that it's real, then they'll say we're biased. It never turns out to be what they say it is. And I will end just by reminding people, as I'm sure people are talking about in the chat, this should not be surprising, the fact that there's no data to this, because prior studies from Stanford in 2023 and 2020, a Princeton study also showed that there is strong evidence that undocumented immigrants commit crimes at lower rates than US-born citizens. And it is not difficult to come up with reasons why. If you're terrified of being deported, you're probably gonna try to comply with the law more. And that is just what study after study shows, but ignore that. It's fun to think that brown people are scary.
But they vote a lot, John.
That's, they vote constantly.
Yeah,
constantly.
It's incredible. They're like, they know, like, everyone who's running for their local school boards. It's wild.